Greetings friends and fellow cigar box guitar enthusiasts. Del Puckett here, and I wanted to get you up to speed on this red brick house that I have just started building. I haven't done anything with the box yet other than identify and select which box I'm going to use. But I did start the neck, and let me show you that right now. So this is the neck. Or this is the headstock anyway. The neck just has a just tempered fret spacing, 25-inch scale. The heel has been glued on and carved. And this is a scarfed headstock. Now notice this. Ta-da! I actually used a template. Finally. And I did want to show you some of the other templates I have. Just for kicks. Check out this guy. Interesting. Another one that's interesting. Where do I get these, you wonder? Well, can you read that? Here's another one. Interesting. These are all 3-stringers. Now the nice thing about this is that you could reverse it if you needed to, or if you wanted to. I suppose you could do that with all of them. I think I want a reverse headstock. Here's another interesting one. Another one that's interesting. These are all interesting. But what's interesting is this one. And what else is interesting is notice how this stripe, the grain stripe here, goes perfectly into the scarf joint. Isn't that interesting? So I started sanding this down. I started off with 60 grit, then I went down to 100 grit, then 150 grit, and that's where I'm at now. The frets have been also grinded down, flush, and dress. I still need to file them, or not file them, but polish them. I'm waiting to get down to the 250 grit sandpaper here, and then I'm going to start edging these guys. And then I'm going to take this thing down all the way down to 2,000 grit sandpaper. And it's just going to be smooth, smooth, smooth. I predict. I know you're wondering, how did he cut that out? You know, all the curves and stuff. Well, moving right along, I did want to give you kind of a pre and a post. This is the pre, this is the post. So these are just stakes, dug fir, and I cut the heel here, and of course I would measure this to cut it off at the bottom. And then the top here where it's been scarfed, what I do is I get these little wings and just glue them on. Create the thicker headstock. Glue them and let them set. I did want to show you that. I am currently on grit number 320, and it's already starting to take on that glass patina. When I'm done, you'll be able to see the reflection of the light. It'll be so smooth. So right now we are at 320 grit, and I've already started wrapping around to include the fret ends now. So a couple of tips here. You're going to want to sand in the direction of the grain. You're not going to want to go across the grain. Obviously when you're filing, with your Shinto and or your bastard file or your round file, then it's okay to go cross grain, but you're going to get those divots in there, and that's when you sand. When you sand, that's when you're going to get all those divots out. Now what I do here is I start out with the coarse grit, and then by degrees I work my way to the finer grit. You say, well, why don't you just go to the finer grit right away? That's a good question, and I've had best results when I just graduate to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. One of the things that does is that, let's say for example, I just went from the 200 grit up to the 320 grit. When I went up to the 320 grit, then as I'm looking, I still see areas that I missed. And so what I'll do is I'll go back to the 220, and then I'll rub out the part that I missed, which becomes apparent when you go to the higher grit. Then you go back to the higher grit, and you work out the little defect that you saw right there. So I guarantee you, now that I got the 320 grit, once I go up to the 400 grit, I'll be able to look back and I'll be able to see defects that the 320 grit missed. So I'll grab the 320, go back and address those, and then go back with the 400. So that layer upon layer, degree by degree, you work your way from the coarse to the fine grit. Does that make sense? Okay, now we have graduated up to the 400 grit sandpaper. Now I want to point out a few things. We are going to use 3 different senses. We are going to be looking at what we're sanding, number 1. We're going to be listening to what we are sanding, number 2. And number 3, we are going to be feeling what we are sanding. So these 3 things here we want to keep in mind. So I put on my reading glasses because I like to see what I'm doing. So as I'm sanding, I put the object that I'm sanding in the proper light so I can see the defects that I'm sanding out, or the smooth that I'm trying to achieve. And then I'm listening and feeling with my hand and the ears. And you'll be able to tell because it'll get slick as this sandpaper layer takes off the layer of grit or grime or texture that you're trying to remove. And you'll also hear it because the sound will go from kind of a raspy, grippy sound to a smooth, slick sound. So all 3 of those you want to put together: sight, feel, and listening. So after a while, you kind of get this internal calibration, and you know when to move along. And again, if you see any defects, sometimes you'll have to go back to the previous layer, sandpaper, work out those defects. Again, sight, sound, listen, and go back to the sandpaper you're on, the layer, and work it out. Yeah, so this is really starting to get that glass feel. We are at 400 grit right now. And for these hard to reach places like that, what I'll do is I'll get a file, and then I'll wrap the sandpaper around the file, and that kind of helps to get into these hard to reach places. So typically I double my grit. So I go from like 60 to 120, then 120 to like 240-ish, then 240-ish to like 500-ish, or then 500 to 1,000, and 1,000 to 2,000. Now that's kind of like the rule of thumb. I mean, obviously you're gonna go with what you got on hand. So the last I had was 400. Now I'm going up to 1,000, and that's because I don't have any 800. But one of the things to note here is that as you get higher and higher in the grit, it actually becomes easier and easier, or quicker I should say, to get it done. The reason being is because there's less to take off, and it just seems to go faster because all the work has been done on the lower, coarser grit. So this is, yeah, I can just tell, man, my gosh, this is just like smooth as. Wow. That is just polishing up. Oh my gosh. Next up, the 2000 grit. All right, here we go. Not that it needs it. It's like, so doesn't even need it. But it's like polish, it's like sanding glass, where it's just so smooth to begin with. And you can even just tell by listening, because there's not a whole lot going on here. I mean, this is down to the splitting the atoms, so to speak. All right, I'm going to hold this up to the light, and hopefully you'll be able to see that polish. Again, that is just from sandpaper. It's like a mirror finish. Isn't that awesome? Seriously. I wanted you to see the back of it too. So, I mean, look at that glistening polish. It's just like it's been shellacked or varnished, but it's just been polished with sandpaper. Oh my gosh. Crazy. I've selected a lovely shade of cherry red. And I'm going to go back once it's done with that 2000 grit sandpaper. And I'm going to polish it up again so that it's red and shiny. Man, this really changes it. Makes it gives it a richness. Now I'm gonna do both. Man, it's already shiny. Sheesh. All right, and I'm going to do both sides because this side here is going to pop out the back. So I'm just going to cover it up. So there's no need to do the end part. I mean, you could if you want, but there's no need to, because then it'll get all your hands. You wouldn't have any place to hold it. So I'm going to let that stain soak in, and then rub it off, rub it in maybe. Man, but I tell you what, man, I must confess I do love the smell of stain. Kind of reminds me of the smell after a rain, you know? Yummy, yummy, yummy. Okay. Isn't that awesome looking? Well, 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 would you look at that? That is just amazing. Amazing, amazing. Okay, let's put it in the box. It's beginning to look legit. Oh, and I also stained that little part, that little wood, exposed wood there, so that it matches. Man, look how shiny that neck is. And that is without reheating it. All right, you guys, if you like these videos, be sure to comment, share, like, and subscribe. And don't forget, there is a link to the Patreon in my YouTube banner above this video. And there are links in the video description below where you can get t-shirts and various cool links and whatnot. So you're gonna have to be sure to check back in the next couple of videos so that you can see and hear how this awesome 3-string cigar box guitar is going to turn out. And I have a funny feeling that it's going to be awesome. All right, you guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.